The Ebola outbreak gripping eastern Congo is now the world's second worst in history. We'll have the latest. On the 30th anniversary of the first World AIDS Day, some are asking, how many more will we observe? And could Angola's most famous operatic tenor inspire more Africans to take up the classical music form? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin our broadcast tonight in eastern Congo, where health officials are battling the second biggest Ebola outbreak in history, with over 420 confirmed and probable cases. Lauren Anthony reports.
The latest Ebola outbreak has become the second worst in African history. Over 425 people have been infected in the North Kivu region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So far, more than half of those have died. The mortality rate for Ebola high at 63%, and this time the virus is proving even harder to contain. Most of the outbreaks began in deeply isolated areas in sub-Saharan Africa. Not this one. It began in August among dense and very mobile local populations. Health workers are struggling to establish an effective vaccination program, with ongoing rebel militia violence making the task harder. Reuters' Giulia Paravicini is in the DRC.
Containment of the current outbreak is particularly difficult, since response teams are being stopped in their daily job by increased insecurity within the city of Beni and also by community resistance. Vaccinations are available, but often, because of the insecurity, teams have to stop the vaccinations, and also surveillance and tracing contacts of patients and transferring the patients to treatment centers. This obviously slows down the response and favors the spread of the disease.
Since its initial discovery in 1976, Ebola's posed most risk to this central swathe of Africa, from Guinea in the west to Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo in the east. The red dots illustrate the locations of previous outbreaks. The biggest so far was between 2014 and 2016 in Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone, in which more than 11,000 people died. The current outbreak is centred on North Kivu in the DRC, the 10th the country has experienced, and now bigger than one in Uganda in 2000. Health workers are not only hampered by gunfire, they often face resistance from the Congolese, who accuse medics of spreading Ebola with their vaccination needles, or believe it does not exist at all. Those who do seek medical help often find themselves in unsanitary medical facilities where the virus spreads. Delays to blood tests and the isolation and safe burial of victims also do little to prevent the spread of Ebola.
Lauren Anthony of Reuters filed that report. On Saturday, December 1st, people worldwide will observe the 30th World AIDS Day. It's a global opportunity for people to come together in the fight against HIV and show their support for people living with the disease and to commemorate those who have died. There has been a lot of progress over the past 30 years, but people are still being infected every day. As VOA's Carol Pearson reports, we have the tools to end the epidemic, but it's far from over.
Fear, stigma, and ignorance. The World Health Organization says these are the reasons the AIDS epidemic is not over. There's no cure yet, but scientists can treat HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. With treatment, no one needs to die from AIDS. Those with HIV can live normal, healthy lives. Those on treatment can't pass it to someone else. With prevention therapy, no one needs to get infected.
We're not there yet, though, because the ability to deliver those at the scale and with the coverage needed to be able to get HIV to go away is not nearly where it should be.
Nearly 1 million people still die every year from AIDS because they don't know they have HIV. They're not being treated, or they start treatment late. One of the biggest challenges is that HIV often affects people who are on the fringes of society.
There's populations at risk for HIV infection all over the world that are underserved, and then these include injection drug users and sex workers in particular.
It also includes men who have sex with men, transgender people, prisoners, and sexual partners of these individuals. Professor Strathty says people in high-risk groups are more concerned about their immediate needs: food, shelter, and jobs.
My research in this field really shows that you need to address the whole person and their needs in order to address HIV as one of their health concerns.
That means governments have to provide the basics, including health care, without considering moral or social norms. Otherwise, countries have to bear the heavy social and economic costs of AIDS.
The biggest thing that we've learned for preventing HIV in the last decades is that there is no magic bullet. And we have to put a whole bunch of really good things together, and it has exactly the kind of impact that a magic bullet would give you.
Scientists say using these tools, educating people, and getting more people into treatment will reduce stigma. And then, when a vaccine comes along, the world will be closer to putting an end to AIDS. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
Was starving, hiding in the bush, or with armed groups, 2 in 3 children in the Central African Republic need aid. According to the United Nations, surging violence, attacks on humanitarian and funding shortages are raising the specter of famine. The UN Children's Agency said on Friday that practically every child needs protection from armed groups who have expanded their control to 4/5 of the country. Every 4th child has fled their home, and thousands of soldiers or sex slaves in armed groups. Fighting has uprooted more than 1 million people, 2.9 million of the 4.6 million population in need of aid. With the risk of famine in a few years, people cannot return to their fields. Central African Republic is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for aid workers, with attacks more than quadrupling since 2017 to almost 300 up to mid-September.
The Central African Republic is quite possibly the most neglected crisis in the world. It is happening in the poorest, least developed country, and humanitarian workers are in one of the most dangerous places. Children's conditions are desperate.
Well, our Central African Republic has been in chaos since 2013, when mainly Muslim Seleka rebels ousted the president, provoking a backlash from Christian anti-Balaka militias. For insight on the situation in CR, I'm joined by Eugene Pehua Palema, president of the Central African Community Council. Eugene, welcome back to Africa 54 after such a long time.
Thank you.
I thought when you come back next, there will be peace and harmony in the Central African Republic. What has been going on?
I mean, you know, remember years ago, the same problem still remaining. The security level did never really change. We organized an election even if we didn't have security. So this is the backlash. Unfortunately, the people that used to live from agricultural income, they don't have that. They don't grow crops, food. So they have to run away from their home. And definitely that caused the crisis that you see today. The government doesn't have troops, so they were depending on UN troops. Unfortunately, UN troops' rule of engagement is different. You have some countries that don't really protecting the population, and so there is no food at this time of the year. And unfortunately, they play like a firefighter trying to quench the fire, but the reality, they have to address the problem.
And that's the thing, you know, because there was a time when there was so much focus in the Central African Republic, and everybody thought that there would be so much help for the people of Central African Republic. Do you feel like somewhere along the way the focus shifted elsewhere, or maybe the problem just became bigger and nobody can handle it?
No, I think the help is there, but maybe where they put the money is not the right place, because, you know, when UN people come in the country, it looks like most of the money is used to pay people that work over there. But they don't address the real problem. The problem is security. If you don't have security, you're going to have those problems where people don't have food. So the main focus of our government to work with the UN and all the members of the UN is to put back security. We don't have troops. We have embargoes on arms, for example, weapons. So there's no way for the CAR to be able to defeat those armed groups that come from other countries and the anti-Balaka that are over there. So they're having the law, they go after gold and diamond, so create a vacuum in the place where they are. People cannot do their agriculture, so there's no...
So, I mean, having peace would mean that people are able to go back to their farms to produce food so they don't have to rely on food aid from the UNHCR, or I mean exactly. from aid organizations.
Exactly, because this is the point. This is a country where agriculture is important, even if gold and diamond bring income, but most of the people work in that sector. So now they cannot be home, they run away, their houses are burned, they attack everywhere. So they depend on assistance from the UN. But that's not the way to help a country. I think the other way would be reestablish security, help the security forces to be stronger, and everything will go back to normal.
How significant is the kind of unity that was being kind of crafted by those in power today? We have seen some kind of a government there, but it hasn't seemed to bring control. It hasn't seemed to bring the peace that was desired. So what is the problem? Where is the problem, really?
I mean, the problem is that before the election, the country was not secure. You know, I think in 2012, when that crisis started, all the security collapsed. So there is no troops. So a president came, but he has no power. His power, his authority is only in the capital. 80-something% of the country is under the control of armed band. So there is no way that a president elected in that situation can change the complete political and socio-economical situation of the country. So there is a big need to understand we have to target the security problem. As long as we don't do that, all the money that they put in CR is like a waste, because we're not reaching the goal that it was supposed to be reaching.
Wow. We hope somebody is listening. Thank you very much, Eugene.
Thank you, Vincent, for
appreciate it very much. Eugene Pewo-Palema is the president of the Central African Republican Community Council. Becoming a little long there. Now, United Nations investigations of its widely praised refugee program in Uganda has uncovered corruption and misconduct costing millions of dollars. The report by the Office of Internal Oversight Services showed inflated bills, fraud and non-compliance with rules, among other malfeasance that caused losses for the UN Refugee Agency. Uganda hosts more than 1 million refugees who have fled South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and other countries. Now, Uganda is praised for its open-entry refugee policy that grants aliens free movement within the country, access to public health services, and small plots of land for settlement and cultivation. The UN audit covered UNHCR's operations in Uganda for 18 months from July 2016. Well, South Africa's High Court has rejected a legal challenge on Friday brought by a group of representing white farmers against President Cyril Ramaphosa's plans for land expropriation without compensation. Ramaphosa, who replaced scandal-plagued Jacob Zuma in February, has made land redistribution a flagship policy as he seeks to unite the fractured ruling African National Congress and win public support ahead of an election next year. In its legal challenge, AfriForum questioned the legality of a key parliamentary committee report which recommended a change to the constitution to allow land expropriation without compensation. Parliament has successfully countered AfriForum's case by saying the court action was premature. Expectations are building over whether U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping can reach a deal to diffuse tensions over trade disputes and security issues when the two meet during the G20 summit underway in Argentina. As U.S. State Department correspondent Nike Ching reports, in the best-case scenario, the meeting could lead to a reset of ties between the world's two largest economies.
Unfair. This is how U.S. President Donald Trump has described China's trade practices. Days before meeting his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Argentina, Trump laid out his condition for a trade deal with China.
It could happen. We have a good relationship. Here's what the bottom line is. China has to treat us fairly. They haven't been. They have to treat us fairly.
U.S. officials accuse Beijing of stealing intellectual property and violating its obligations as a World Trade Organization member. They say the G20 talks are aimed at addressing those and other concerns.
The president and his team will pursue several administration priorities, including promoting global and domestic economic growth and prosperity, ensuring free, fair, and reciprocal trade and a system of fair economic competition, enhancing cooperation to strengthen financial markets, promoting women's economic empowerment, and increasing access to affordable and reliable energy sources.
But the recent trend in U.S.-China relations do not provide a reason for optimism. Washington's complaints go beyond trade, pointing to Beijing's aggressive behavior in asserting control over huge sections of the South China Sea. China expert Susan Shark.
It's starting to look like an irresponsible and selfish power, just interested in its own sovereignty claims. So that, the South China Sea, I think, has been very damaging to China's international reputation.
Still, former U.S. Ambassador to China Winston Lord says continuing talks are key to easing tensions between Washington and Beijing.
We've got to strive to make sure we avoid miscalculation. That's why I think we should have more dialogue, not less, even if it's unproductive at times. We ought to stay in touch at high levels.
Lord said neither country wants a fight. The leaders' meeting this week is seen as a chance to reset the rocky relationship. Nike Chin, VOA News, State Department.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter, VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, the Angolan tenor who has gone from church choir to classical stages around the world. But first, a look at Friday's headlines.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, health officials say more than 425 people have been infected with the Ebola virus in North Kivu, making it the second largest outbreak in African history. In the Central African Republic, the United Nations says 2 in 3 children are in need of aid as violence surges and funding shortages raise the odds of famine in the country. In South Africa, former President Jacob Zuma arrives in court for his hearing on 16 counts of financial crimes related to an arms deal. He denies wrongdoing. Finally, in Uganda, a 23-year-old woman has launched an app so that those who live with AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases can get critical information about their sexual health. The free platform, Ask Without Shame, was created by Ruth Nabembezi.
Well, presidents, prime ministers, and Hollywood stars have visited what from the outside may look like an old and shabby jazz club in New Orleans. In this case, however, appearances are quite deceiving. Musicians call this place the holy grail of clubs and more, and home to American jazz. VOA's Maya Kay went to the famous Preservation Hall that tells the story of jazz.
Nothing reflects America's diverse musical identity than jazz, a genre that originated in the African American communities of New Orleans, Louisiana. And nowhere is jazz as alive and as vibrant as in its birthplace, where live music is heard from every street corner, club, and restaurant. But one place in the city is synonymous with the history and cultural tradition of jazz: Preservation Hall.
Immigration and our common ancestry and our common bonds as newcomers to this land is what created this music, and it keeps it fresh and constantly invigorated by people coming in and experiencing it and bringing their cultures to bear here.
A house band plays there 5 times a day, every day, and there is always a long line waiting to get in, even during weekdays. Preservation Hall is a major tourist magnet in New Orleans' historic French Quarter, which combines cultures and traditions from around the world. The Spanish and French, Creole and American all left their mark in this city that is like no other in the United States. Preservation Hall hasn't been remodeled since the early 1960s, when musicians were first invited to play in what was then an art gallery. The walls of this historic building are adorned with old photos. The locks are old and rusty, floorboards creak. The interior, together with the music that's played there, preserves the aura of the club.
Preservation in regards to preserving a way of life and a way of looking at things, but it can be a tricky term because it can be isolating, right? When people think of preserving something, you're taking something and keeping it the same way for the rest of it, as long as you can keep it going. But we also, our mission statement is to protect, preserve, and perpetuate. And all three words are equally as important to us, and to us that's all part of preservation.
Many American and foreign musicians dream of performing here. Singer-songwriter Tom Waits called it a sacred, hallowed ground of jazz after he made a record there.
It's the lifeblood of people. It's the story of people, and so I think if you ask somebody, well, it's obvious, if you ask somebody what jazz is in Chicago and somebody in New Orleans, it's going to be two dramatically different answers. So to me, it's people music.
We take a boat to the land of dreams. Heaven on earth, they call it New Orleans.
About 18 million tourists visit New Orleans every year to listen to this truly American music. In this city, jazz sets the tone in parks, over the Mississippi River, and welcoming visitors at the international airport named for Louis Armstrong, jazz legend.
They call it New Orleans.
Maya Kay, VOA News, New Orleans, Louisiana.
It's a street, long time ago.
Well, in Friday's Music Makers segment, we present to you Angola's most famous operatic tenor, who hopes to inspire more Africans to take up the classical music form. Nelson Ibo has performed around the world and is currently starring with the Heartbeat Opera Company on stage in New York. He recently sang here in Washington, where VOA Myra D. Lassalette met up with him.
Nelson Ibo started singing at church in Angola's capital, Luanda, where he says he met the person who opened doors to a wider world.
I'm an Angolan tenor. I came from Angola, from singing in church. And then from there I met Mr. Mario Gama, that was our national folkloric singer. And he also used to sing in church. So he took me to sing with him in all the concerts, in churches.
Ibo sang at events at the Performance Hall in Luanda, and at 18 impressed the listener enough to win a scholarship.
Someone from the UN came and he told me, well, let's get out of here. I'll take you to Spain and you will be studying music in there because you have a great talent to sing opera. I'm like, okay, well, let's do this.
Ibo's main concern, he was the main breadwinner for his parents and some of his 14 siblings.
We had a very difficult life there, and actually that took me to do this work, right? To go and sing everywhere and get the money, bring the money, and give to them and help them so they would eat the next day. I was feeling guilty from leaving them. But on the other hand, it was fantastic to go to a different country and sing opera.
His coaches in Spain included Plácido Domingo, one of his heroes.
As an Angolan, and that is something that doesn't happen.
Ibo moved to the United States in 2008 to study and perform. Since then, he has been on stages around the world. Whenever he goes on stage, he recalls leaving his relatives years ago.
They're the feeling for everything, like seeing them there in that door waiting for me, saying goodbye to me, and me going to that UN car that was right stopping on my door.
At age 34, the tenor says he has another dream to fulfill, teaching young people about opera.
I wanted to go one day to Angola, now that I'm in this fantastic career, and bring my talent, bring everything I learned to make them learn the beautiful world of music.
That would be another high note in Nilson Ibu's lofty music career. Mayra de la Salette, VOA News, Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. 13-year-old Omar Achen of Morocco has become a social media star after garnering hundreds of thousands of views on videos of him preparing delicious meals and providing recipes, all while battling myopathy. The young chef was diagnosed with a rare disease at birth, limiting his ability to use his limbs due to stiffness in muscle fibers. His doctors have recommended that he should engage in physical activities to train his fingers. Due to his medical condition, many schools refused to enroll him, but he was finally accepted in an American school where he leads cooking classes and gives instructions to his classmates. Well, and finally, forget the days of nursing a drink at the bar with pouring out your woes to the bartender. At least if a new establishment in Prague is a sign of the future, the Cyberdog in the Czech capital features a robotic bartender who serves drinks ordered through a phone app. A red robotic arm picks among 7 wines on offer in a cool box. It then opens the bottle and pours up to 4 glasses at a time. Next, it lifts the glasses on a tray that travels overhead to the customer's table, then lowers the load so people can pick up their glasses. Now, the bar also serves food prepared by people, at least for now. And that's what's trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Now, be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night, a great weekend.
Welcome to English in a Minute. This expression sounds like a violent way of eating, but it's actually not always about eating.
Here is your Russian book, Anna. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Oh, are you done with level 1 already?
Yeah, I finished last week, and I've already finished level 2.
Wow, you are really sinking your teeth into learning Russian.
Well,